Hi, I'm Lady Willo Wellspring.
And I'm Alfred Willowhawk. And we are the founders of the Wite Rayvn Metaphysical Church of the Ozarks, and very happy to be able to spend some time with you tonight.
Absolutely. There are several different aspects of our organization, but our primary goal has always been to facilitate other people's path. We do have very specific Wite Rayvn tradition, but we do additionally have some other formal training as well.
We basically formed in this incarnation in 2012 here in West Plains, Missouri. Previously we were in Lawrence, Kansas, and we started as a coven, moved here at the encouragement of some individuals within the ATC as well, and then formed this organization where we, as facilitators of other people's paths, we have a very eclectic open circle. The church environment allows us the protections of the government that we can't have as a coven, with some political clout in the area as well, which is one of the reasons we went that way.
Absolutely.
The wonderful Three Gates Gathering. It's a funny story how that actually all came to being, thanks to my lovely wife. First of all, I'm a very well-trained priest, and I have learned the lesson EAW, estrogen always wins. And so a group of us third degrees were sitting in Council Bluffs, Iowa, of all places, and we were drinking mead, smoking cigarettes and other things, legal things.
Yes.
Only legal things, cigars is what we meant.
Yes.
And talking, and we were lamenting that we were becoming very denominational as pagans, and that we really needed to have something that was not tradition specific, that was cross tradition. And all of us HPs agreed, and all of the HPSs looked at each other and said, well, you guys ought to do something about that.
And who was the HPSs besides me?
We had you, and we had the HPS from Black Forest was with us. Yes, she was. Yeah, because it was you, me, Steph, and two others that were there, weren't there?
Yes, but they were second degrees.
Oh, okay. Okay. So this came into being, and then we went home to Lawrence, Kansas, and we actually began the process. We joined with two other groups at that point, and we had the first three of them in Tonganoxie, Kansas. One of the things that occurred as we were writing it, we contacted Chris Penzak and actually Selena Fox, and we sent them a working on what we thought that this would look like, because we wanted it to be a mystery school, not a gathering, not a festival, where we actually sat and we learned with some depth, and we called it Three Gates of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And so that you could take each particular topic and could extend it from a very basic understanding to a deep understanding, so that at the end of the festival you actually had a really good understanding of that particular topic. We run 3 topics a year, and every third year, after 3 years, we drop one topic and add another, and so that it really gets pretty extensive there.
Yep. Even as early as just 10 years ago, internet and the accessibility of what was out there has greatly changed. There's a lot more, but one of the problems that we were discussing is that you could read all the books that you want, but you may not be able to find a local group because you didn't know how to look for one, or didn't have the contact, or even know as far as gatherings and particular events. So that was one of the reasons that our very first three gates, we encouraged the covens and people that didn't normally talk outside of their groups or their traditions to come, because they all knew us, so to come and interfaith. And that's exactly what happened. That first three gates, everybody had their designated group areas where everybody in that group all knew each other. And we had everybody from Wite Rayvn running around. We set up 2 great big pavilions. By the end of the first night, we're passing around stories and bottles of mead, and everybody was there. There wasn't a tent or a group that wasn't in that community discussion. So that made a lot of validation for that initial 3 gates. And after that, we had an elder come up
that very first
that
year,
had
at the end of the year.
scoped us out because she didn't know us directly. So she had to check us out before her group was going to get involved with this thing. And our people always have tried to be as helpful as possible when they come running. And I'm like, go help her. I don't know who she's with, but go help her put up that tent and stuff. And by the end, she walked up and she said, all right, here is the next year's registration. So you can't not have another one. And ever since then.
And ever since then, and some of the people that see this may actually know who that is. It's actually Gray Mare.
Yeah.
Gray Mare from the Red Grail came out and scoped us out that first year, and then every year we have a little tradition, even including this year now, 10 years later. She came up to me at the end of the festival and she said, here is the money for the 11th year. And that it has always been her encouragement right from the beginning. It's really gratifying because every year we bring individuals from different traditions to teach these different paths, and that typically we don't have the same person repeat their same track for that year or another year. This year we had yourself, Reverend Don Lewis. We were so blessed to have you there for divination and intuition.
Absolutely.
We had Reverend Don Davis for tradition versus tradition, and Elaine, and we had Mama Gina Arlene, and then we had Mama Gina Lamonte, who many of us know as the Nine-Toed Bards, but she is a long-term student of Kabbalah, and that she has a wonderful thing that she does for basic Kabbalah, and she did that this year, which is really quite good. And we've had many different individuals from different groups, and now we have people that come some years from as far away as Canada, although this last 2 years they haven't come. Those folk haven't come.
Well, they had
one
babies.
of them had babies, and so they couldn't come, and the others just haven't made it across the Great Divide up there.
And we've had presenters that we've lost, too.
And we've had presenters that we have lost.
And are sorely missed.
And are sorely missed, indeed. And people come from all over the country for 3 gates. We're really quite blessed that this is still going on now. We have completed 10 years in a row of 3 gates gathering.
Even with the move.
Because originally we were in Lawrence, Kansas as a coven, and when we became a church and moved south, so we were concerned, would people take that extra distance all the way to West Plains, Missouri? And they have. The original supporters, 2 of those original groups still support us. The Red Grail and Coven of the Crossroads. Mm-hmm. They both still support us, and they were supporters of ours way back in the beginning.
Well, yeah, and then the one is because their head had passed. So.
Right, that was the 3rd group, yes.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, the original groups are still even part of this, which is really wonderful. We're really blessed for this.
And a lot of the times, when we moved, our numbers dropped down to like our first time. Actually, yeah.
Yeah,
about
they
the
dropped
same.
a bit about where it
About
was.
the
Yeah,
same
about this
for
year. Yeah.
the first year.
Yeah.
And but what we've seen is anybody who's actually came, presenters, hopefully the ones this year just the same. I think that's going to be the case for the majority, and you might have some surprises in store with that.
Yes, and like every other event, as soon as the event is over, you're already planning the next one. But we promised ourselves that we weren't going to say anything about next year's event, just that there will be a Three Gates Gathering, year 11. So, well, I think my hopes for the future is that we stop the identity wars and the witch wars. They're more destructive to the community, and they're more destructive to the craft. I mean, all of us, regardless of what our traditions, take some form of oath, whether you call it that or not, to preserve the craft. And preserving the craft doesn't mean that I argue with the Alexandrians, or that the Alexandrians argue with the Georgians, or the Georgians argue with the Corellians, or anything else like that. Our traditions are about our individual spirituality. Individual spirituality is just that, spirituality. Yes, we recognize this for political and economic reasons as a religion, and it's very important here in the States that we have that, because it gives us a political clout that we wouldn't have otherwise. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't work together. Community is about sharing. Community is not about proving your own identity, because if you're trying to prove your identity, then you don't have an identity. I like that particular statement of mine that I like, is I say, well, what makes you think that the gods need you to defend them?
And that's exactly the point. This started out as intermingling of the groups that normally would not talk to each other. And it's grown from that. There is no reason to sit there and ostracize something that you may not agree with, but as a whole, it is that very statement. It is about preserving the craft in all of its forms, and so you have to add to it. And with every generation, there's a new facet that's chipped in or shaped. And we have to not be so much that we are still in the closet. And I understand that fear, because there was job persecutions, the right to work states where there were lawyers and there were doctors and there were teachers and there were firemen, and goodness gracious, you are an upstanding citizen in that community, and if they found out, it would be a whole nother ball game. So I understand that, but we've been so out. But we've been out, and there's been a lot of misunderstandings with that. When you're looking at a book or you're looking at the internet, you're looking at all these different answers, and that is because of the different traditions and the different belief structures, and some of them are quite different. And that's okay. That is okay. We can celebrate the Sabbaths and the Sabbaths in its own fashion, and we come to a similar group, but everybody steps in their own path. And you come in alone and you go out alone, and when we reach it, we'll all say hi in the end.
Right, and really that's it. I mean, so many times we consider ourselves an interfaith ministry here at Wite Rayvn, and we're gender neutral, which had caused problems for a few years within certain groups, and we have individuals that have come to us out of very bad experiences, and the very fact that they come to us is because we are gender neutral. We look at the energy that an individual presents, not their plumbing. Plumbing is not an issue. It's that energy that they present. I mean, there's projective and receptive energy. And if you project your energy, then you stand in that place for us. We still honor the original traditions we come from, and we honor and understand where they come from. We choose in an open environment not to practice in that way, because we are trying to be more inclusive to build a viable, strong community that can stand together, rather than a bunch of denominations that are constantly arguing.
Well,
the arguments are useless.
and we don't have the same groups. You know, we don't have those same categories for women and men anymore. We don't have the young maiden who's innocent, and then we have the mother that we put on the mask, and we are always wearing those faces and putting on those paints to fit into society, where now there's so many other shades of gray, for lack of a better word, that there are women who never become mothers. There are women who don't have that home mom, housewife persona, because frankly families can't afford it mostly anymore. That's not feasible. So those roles and those specific guidelines on dominance and projective, yes, they are true to some extent, but who's to say what the next evolution is going to be? And we can't close those doors.
Right.
We have to open them and let them slowly come to terms.
And accept them for where they are. I mean, many of the for the individuals that are transgender or identify as third gender, for us, we recognize them for what they are, and we do the best that we can within the community to. Even
Native American had a long-standing belief of twin spirits, and there are a lot of cultures that feel that same way.
Right, and so our structure of our basis of a Western Judeo-Christian structure. We've kind of grown beyond that, and some people don't like that idea, and that's okay too, because there are groups for them too, which is one of the beauty. And there's validity across the board. There are groups for everyone, but it doesn't mean that we can't have a cross-traditional mystery school where we don't discuss our individual traditions or our individual practices, that we discuss those things that are common to all. You've come across that very thing that we love to talk about. We'll soapbox this all night for you if you want. It's just
you want to go individual, you want to go together?
Why don't we do? I think that the audience would be interested to see our individual, because then we can then talk to how we blended it afterwards. I mean, I think that would be pretty cool.
Okay.
Why don't you go first?
I think that a lot of individuals have that natural calling. We don't even recognize when we're young and when we're a child. We do certain things, and it's gifts, and it's those things that never really made us fit in the general population, but we had either the courage, determination, or luck, as many of that was, to find teachers in a lot of forms. My very first exposure to a Wiccan tradition was in the gardening group. And I did learn quite a bit. I think that in the preservation of craft, you pick up things as you mature and as you grow as an individual practitioner. Not leaning away completely from those roots, because you have to have a foundation. You do have to have a strong foundation, otherwise you'll build every which way but loose, and it'll always crumble down. So that was my initial And then as the fates decided, we'll let you talk about yours and how we came together.
Oh my. Okay, well, in terms of individuals who are the most influential for me, it would be Gerald Gardner. I read most of his work after I realized that Willow had some inkling in the Gardnerian. Before that, believe it or not, before that is that the work of Starhawk and some of the work of DJ Conway, some of the things that were floating around him by Witch School International influence. I mean, I did grow up initially in the craft. My grandmother was one of the individuals who taught me. We are recognized through Dinyan Moon of that particular clan, so that it's one of those clans that actually was a clan that was recognized across the pond, not like some of that nonsense that went on in the early 90s that,
or 80s,
my grandmother's uncles, brothers, canaries, sisters, dogs, salamander taught me that's not what I was.
And of course we all had our grandmother's grandma.
Oh yeah, right. Everyone had their grandmother's grandma. Other than the fact that they were buried with them and burned, maybe you had copies, but anyway. Anyway, yeah, let's go with the other structures. And then, believe it or not, the work of Charles Leland, the Gospel of Aradia, was a pretty strong thing for me. And Etruscan remains, the Roman Etruscan remains, this anthropological work. In fact, originally I found Gerald Gardner only through the little subtext or small things on his work on the Crease. That it was like, oh, he's an anthropologist. I can get an anthropology. Plus, I had my grandmother's things. I had a falling out through to different things, and I've told DJ Conway herself this, is that I was in a bookstore before I met Willow, and and of course she doesn't remember because it's probably one of a million letters, emails that she got over the years. I picked up Oak Ash Thorn by her. And it reminded me of who I am and what I am. And that began me on the road. That began my process to return. When I got to Kansas, I was running a Reiki circle. And we were both working for
a company.
A company. And I was out in the smoke shack. And one of the other individuals in that Reiki circle said, oh, I invited this person to come to our Reiki circle, and I was like, "Oh, cool! It's an open circle." And then she comes.
Not just a Reiki circle. She practiced as well.
Yeah, I mean, then it's true that most of the individuals that were going to my circle were all practitioners. But then Willow came bouncing out of her building, and I'm looking at this, and I said, "Do you see that doe jumping through it?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that's Willow, although by a different name." She's the one I invited to the circle, and then
actually I think your exact words, because I heard in the smoke shack, was, "Did you get a scent of that dough?"
I was trying to be, respectful for all of our listeners out here, our video folk. Anyway, long story short, we became magical partners. And
that was all I was going to do for the...
Right, that's all. And then about a year later, the gods made a different choice for both of us.
Yeah.
And we've been together since then, basically. We both worked with a Gardnerian coven in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and with some of that, and went through that particular process and moved on from there.
Along with certain other traditions as well.
Right.
Alexandrian is one of them. And then we also worked with some of the eclectic traditions too. So we can honestly say from multiple different facets of training and multiple different interactions, long-standing interactions, that it's okay to be who you are. You had said, and I totally didn't mention my first things, but a lot, I think, if you have those bloodlines or connections, and you don't even realize just how the myths, the legends, the Greek lore, the Rome, you relate, you remember. I remember when I was very young, and I would just absorb these things and say, oh, I remember that, but I knew I could not possibly. And there was so much interactions that finally I knew that Christianity wasn't for me. I didn't hold any grudges for other people's path, because even if that is definitely not my way of thinking, or Alfred's way, or any of you, it's okay as long as they can reach the divine in their form of understanding. And I think that's the point, is that divine, God, Goddess, whatever, Mother Nature, however you see that divine, it's going to get and come to you as you can understand it. Now, maybe you will grow, and maybe that will be the big change for you, to find something else or reach an understanding or more wisdom to get there. But I had my own religious name. I had my own belief structure, because I did not agree that there should be a religion, because that just, I've seen the Wiccan Wars, I've seen at that time, I've seen the Christian Wars, and it was horrid to me. I absolutely opposed violence in any shape. So, yeah, when I had sit there and explained to, at that time I didn't know a second degree of a tradition, and she's like, but you know, what do you believe in? I'm like, well, I'm a naturalist, and everything is interconnected, and da-da-da-da-da, and I'm going through this whole spiel, and she's just like, have you ever read anything about, like, paganism, or Wiccan, or anything like that? And I said, oh, no, I'm not even going to get sucked into any more of that religious stuff. And so she was a friend and a tutor for years before I finally said and got invited to a certain circle. No, it was not a traditional circle in any way or shape, but I had explained to her what had happened, and I'm like, if that's what that is, that's definitely not for me. And she said, okay, no, you're coming to mine now. And I said, what? And I'm like, and she's like, yes, it is by invite only, and we have to be careful on who we invite in. So I was very, very fortunate into that.
You were.
But it was, I think, a lot of practitioners, a lot of people that are and come and are long-standing, they know it at a very young age. It's just something that they reach into that subconscious or altered state that gets that realism to manifest.
And of course, for me, it's very logic, research driven, so that for me, it was a lot of the books and then meeting the people and the connections that I had developed over the years that allowed me to progress in the craft, and then finally come to be with Willow and to bring us here, frankly, to create Wite Rayvn. We created it from scratch, pretty much, based on all kind of a blending of our different paths and our groups. I mean,
well, yeah, because you had a Welsh
family tradition and very Celtic.
I respected my partner, so why would I not take some of our partnerships and work together? Just because I was trained a certain way doesn't mean that his wasn't invalid. And finally, that was where I looked at him and I said, look, you, and we won't even talk about the first.
No, we won't. We won't talk about that particular ritual for your Alexandrian
our very
seconds.
first working ritual
Yeah.
where.
Yeah, we're not
I
going. No, don't do
I
it.
have
Don't
to
do
do
it.
the one
No,
thing.
don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yes, he was taught because he was young
Mm-hmm.
to pass the blade over and not put it in symbolically. And finally, somebody said, "Hey, Alfred, you know how to put the blade in the cup." And
Yeah.
Yes,
And then I was like, oh, okay.
yes. Yeah.
But then, of course, after that, we did get, with Willow's encouragement, as well as the group up in Council Bluffs, is that we did receive the.
That was not Council Bluffs.
What are you talking about? No, not that.
Oh.
We eventually
Right.
received the training in Council Bluffs so that I could actually have the proper training in that particular tradition, which took it out of the family trad and the other Welsh structures to a more traditional form, which was the base of where Wite Rayvn came from. And then we kind of merged to create what we have now. So.
Yeah.
I just want them to know that I have traditional training.
Oh, okay. I think we got that. Yeah, and that's it. A lot, I've noticed a lot of the groups that did or originally came from a more traditional background.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them like the Greek gods, some of them like the Roman gods. A lot of people like the Celtic because you're, Ancestry.com. Oh my goodness, now you can even do DNA to track your bloodline. Yeah. Sure.
Anyway, that's for another show at another time. But yeah, we ended up blending the Celtic and the Greek.
And it was out of respect for each other.
For each other and each other's paths. And that was really where we wanted to get to, is that the respect that we had for each other's paths and the understanding that these are aspects of divine and it's what connects to us, faith, whether it's bloodline or by choice. That isn't really a point. It's just that to have that mutual respect then allows you to blend and to utilize these as appropriate aspects because the gods are within and without. And it's how you connect to the divine and the relationship with them that then you build relationships together. And that's why we're still together. Just like the astrologer told us in the very beginning, you guys are crazy, the Capricorn and the Leo, but if you can get through the first 2.5 years, and we apparently managed.
Compromise,
yeah. Well, they could go to whiterayvn.org, which is WITERAYVN.org. That is our regular site. If they're interested in knowing more about Three Gates Gathering, they can go to threegatesgathering.com. There are contact forms there which link to our emails, and we're always more than happy to contact people. We're both on Facebook as well in social media. I'm Alfred Willowhawk, and Willow is Willo Wellspring. Just remember, it's not the tree for her. It's WILLO apostrophe Wellspring. Otherwise, you'll never find her. Which is, I think, sometimes by design.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, not at all. Those are really two really good places to find us. You could also listen to me on thecauldron.net every Friday night with my co-host at 9 p.m. Eastern. And a little birdie told me that we'll be interviewing Reverend Don Lewis for this week on our show as well. So it's kind of a group together. I just want to say that I'm really honored to be able to be the facilitator of bringing together so many different groups. I'm
We
always
have
amazed.
We had a new one come this year.
This year, a brand new group, and we're just really honored that we are able to facilitate that safe space, that family, that family feeling, that come and be family and relax, and nobody's had an agenda, and everybody can communicate appropriately, and we're just really honored to be able to do that, and honored to be here with you tonight, Reverend Ellen.
Our initial intent was that it was never supposed to be a pagan party, and that not that doesn't have its place, because sometimes you just need to let your hat off.
Yeah,
But that's
and some other stuff.
right. But that's
Sorry.
That's another
day.
Yes.
So thank you again, really very much for the opportunity to be here with you tonight.
Thank you.